Hi, welcome back to another episode of PAFOW Live. It's been another eventful week in the world of people, data, and analytics, and we have much to share and explore. We have two fantastic guests. Stephen Wang of Hello Collective will join me at the bottom of the hour at 9:30 Pacific, and then Alex Zia from LeadGen will join me at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and she'll be talking about employee experience, digital transformation. And if you know Stephen at all, you know exactly what we'll be talking about: diversity, equity, and inclusion, how to measure it, how to actually take it forward in this new remote work environment. So before we get there, though, I want to share some news and dive into some deep concepts which I believe are going to set the stage for that discussion, and also share some news, namely around TikTok. So here's our agenda for today. Data privacy and ethics, specifically what is happening with the consumption of apps and how that is affecting our personal privacy, as well as what organizations are finding insofar as they have dilemmas that are pushing on ethical boundaries on how to use data, if to use data, and so forth. So we'll get into that shortly. We'll also talk about employee experience, or worker experience, as I prefer to talk about it. Is it something that is a buzzword? Is it going to have legs beyond this fad? Because if you've been around a while in HR or business, you've seen fads come and go. And so I am particularly interested to see if this one actually has legs. And Alex and I will certainly be exploring that. And finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion. With that, this is the specifics of what we're going to be discussing. Is what does TikTok and that model mean for people analytics? And this is going to be relevant to CHROs, those who are actually doing the work, and namely people analytics professionals, HR business partners, as well as just workers, because we have to understand how our data is going to be used, whether it be generated in the workplace or on our personal time. And again, employee experience, I am hopeful, but I also have some skepticism around this notion, and I'll explain why as we get to it. And finally, with diversity, equity, inclusion, I would hope that what's happening with Black Lives Matter, what's happening with the advancement of LGBTQ rights, that we are in fact going to move towards a sustainable, positive change. But there's work to be done, and we're going to explore what that work looks like in the final segment before the bottom of the hour. So with that, let's get straight into what's happening with our data, namely the data that we are generating through these seemingly safe devices. And we'll talk a bit about GDPR. If you are familiar with GDPR, and I hope you all are, whether you be a worker, a consumer, or a people analytics professional, or business leader, we all have a responsibility to be educated on what that means, because it is the North Star for how privacy and ethics are going to advance over the years to come. So it went into effect now a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Was it last year? I think it was 2 years ago now. The time is flying by. But it's this essence that it is the basic human right to be forgotten. In other words, data historically, particularly in Europe, was misused, and people suffered to a great degree. And I'm talking about the world wars, where religious affiliations were compromised and people were persecuted because of that. That's an extreme example. Here in the United States, individual data has been used to target minority groups and offer them unfair interest rates on credit cards, for example, to market to certain zip codes, predatory lending. All these things were rooted in outreach to specific demographic groups that were identified based on data. Now, did they know they were generating this data? Did they know they were being targeted? Oftentimes not. So our laws are lagging the innovations that are unfolding. So here we are with COVID-19. We have this global pandemic, and as you see on your screen now, the EU regulators were talking about a pan-European COVID-19 app, which sounds fantastic. In fact, if you look at what happened in Southeast Asia, they actually applied apps that were able to do contact tracing, and it's fantastic. However, where does that data go? Who's using that data? Do those apps access other apps? So all these questions have to be asked and answered before we can comfortably move forward and apply these technologies. Similarly, once the data is generated, who owns it? Here you see the mobile phone industry explores worldwide tracking of users. Now, is it the United Nations who owns that? Is it the phone companies? Is it governmental organizations? These questions have not, frankly, even been asked, and we have not had lucid conversations about the answers. And that's where we need to get to. There's been very passionate points of view that no, we can't do that. And they're very passionate, we have to mitigate the risk of the global health crisis. At the end of the day, much like the pandemic itself, and when we're talking about return to workplace, it's an optimization problem. And we have to weigh the risks versus the opportunities. And again, that takes data in and of itself to make good, well-informed decisions. So let's segue to Southeast Asia and specifically to TikTok. So contact tracing actually worked in places like China. However, China, if you don't know, does not adhere to GDPR. It's a European convention. However, if you're a global company and you have EU employees, then you have to comply by GDPR. So many companies, global companies, have defaulted to GDPR as a normal business practice, which is fantastic. But not all countries in the world have done so. China is one of those. And I'm not placing judgment on this right now. I'm just stating facts, and we are going to have to be very lucid about those facts and make wise decisions. So here we are at TikTok, and it's been in the news quite a bit lately. And I have great fortune of raising two kids. Son is 19, daughter is 17. I do not have TikTok on my phone, and it's the one app that I have forbidden my kids from downloading. This is why. I am not comfortable with how that app not only accesses your phone, but evidently it accesses other apps and collects data on you via those apps. Now, I have done my investigation. It has made me concerned enough to take that stance. I don't pretend to know it perfectly, but as a consumer, I am willing to spend the energy to educate myself before I blindly press the privacy agreement. And as you likely know, TikTok in the US is run by a US-based CEO. That being said, it is a Chinese-based app. And it reminds me of a circumstance that happened a few years ago where I bought a scale, very nice looking weight scale to put in our bathroom. And when I got it, the instructions were only in Chinese. They were only in language that I did not understand. And the measurements were only in kilos. So the first action that I could discern was to download an app because it had a QR code on it. So I start to do this process, and I realized the app itself is in Chinese. Forgive me for not knowing it was Mandarin and Cantonese. But it was the case where I don't know what that app is going to do. I don't know what other apps it's going to access, what data is going to collect. And I said no. So did not end up using the scale, ate the $17 or whatever, how much it cost, because I did not understand where my data was going to go. So with that, we as consumers, as business leaders, as people analytics professionals need to ask three questions. And frankly, there's more than three, but these are the three primary questions for my money. What data are being collected? Who's going to have access to that data, and how are they going to use the data? When we talk about the data itself, that's one question, but who is as important. So there's a lot of press right now, oh, it's going to go to the Chinese government, and okay, that could happen via TikTok. It could also go to an entity, a bank, to my earlier example, that could create exploitative practices against a certain demographic group. People who behave a certain way, might be prejudiced in some way. There could be biases that emerge. We just don't know. So that who and where, I'll add, is very, very important. If we don't have clear answers, and those people who are trying to answer don't inspire confidence, then I say no. So, but right now we're in this risk. Reasons we have risk: we have complacency, we have confusion about this whole topic, and we have this "it doesn't affect me" syndrome. So, hey, I'm exchanging my data for access to this app. It's pretty cool. Therefore, it's a shoulder shrug. So anyway, there's more to share and explore, and I'm sure we're going to get into this with our guests. But for now, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about employee experience.